From the Lean Enterprise Institute in Boston, this is the WLEI Podcast, where we share stories of people making the world better through lean thinking and practice. For more information about LEI, including how we can help you apply lean thinking, please visit lean.org.
Welcome to the Management Brief. As a quick reminder for our listeners, this month we are exploring problem solving at the corporate level with some key business leaders. Today, Josh Howell and I are joined by Jim Lancaster, CEO of Lantech, the company that invented and makes stretch wrap machines. For those of you in the lean world, Jim Lancaster's company was made famous in the 1990s as a case study in Jim Womack's book, Lean Thinking. Lantech is located in Louisville, Kentucky. The company was started by Pat Lancaster, Jim's father, who owned the patent for the stretch wrap machine and applied lean thinking in practice to improve the company. Jim, his son, went off to Wall Street as a financial analyst, but eventually ended up back at Lantech and took over the management of the company in 1990. His business has gone through a series of business cycles from incredible growth and improvement to huge challenges. And Jim, in line with that, has gone through his own journey of self-development over the last 20 years, learning very important lessons on what the role and purpose of the CEO is in an enterprise. Lantech has had a long association with the Lean Enterprise Institute. Jim Lancaster published an important book for us in 2017 called The Work of Management. This book brings to light Jim's personal learning and how that has impacted the success of Lantech as a company. And then the pandemic happened, and big surprise, the world of Lantech was upended again, and Jim had to rethink what he wrote in his book and how he runs his company. Jim's company is successful. Since 2020, its business has grown by 75%, but there have been huge challenges, and Jim has reaffirmed the need to go back to the basics and to develop people from the bottom up. Let me introduce Jim. Hi, Jim.
Thanks for having me, you guys. This is great.
Good to have you with us. So let's start just by introducing yourself and give a little overview of your work career and your experience with Lean.
So my work career is pretty simple. I worked here at Lantech all through high school. Started when I was 14, all through latter part of middle school and high school, and one or two summers while I was in college, and then went in the financial world working for a couple of banks, and then finally ended up working for a leveraged buyout company in New York. Where I spent a couple of years that were incredible. And that's where I met my wife. And as soon as I called my father to tell him that I was engaged, he showed up on my futon couch the following morning and made a proposal for me to move back to Louisville and help run the family business. My education is in finance and marketing with a little bit of mechanical engineering in there just for kicks and giggles. So that's that. I was very involved in the very first part of the lean transformation that we made back with Shingjutsu and a consulting firm called TBM way back in the early 90s, not as a leader, but as a participant. And so I had my hands dirty on the shop floor and in primarily office kaizens, we called them back then, when we made the transition. But I sort of grew up in the sales side of our business for that first 4 or 5 years before taking over and running the company in 1995, which is when I really started leading the charge on lean as opposed to just sort of participating in the workshops and that sort of thing. So that's sort of my background, but I've been in and around it for, since the early 90s. So for a really, really long time through its various terms of what it was called and various epics. But the core principles have not changed, and the value has not changed.
So Jim, this is Josh. Thanks again for joining Mark and I. So I also was a finance major in undergrad. I got 4 years of training, calculating net present value more times than I can remember. And it's been interesting for me, having gotten that education and then later getting exposed to lean and spending now 15, 20 years in this world. Sort of as I think back to what, I was kind of trained and educated and learned with that finance degree, and then what from that experience I brought forward into business and now into lean management and stuff like that. I'm curious, as you reflect back on your experience in Wall Street and all that training that you received both in school and then in practice in Wall Street itself, sort of what are some of the things that you took away from that experience that you continue to leverage in running the business? And maybe what are some things that, as you got deeper and deeper into the lean world, perhaps you had to kind of reconsider?
I think the basic thinking process of how you analyze data that you learn in finance and you learn in credit and you learn in I wouldn't call it analytics, what I did exactly, but that and business valuation and project valuation and all that is still extremely valuable. So I learned my way around a spreadsheet. I learned how to think and deal with data in a different way. And then I also learned how to present that data in a way that is compelling to others. So I think that was really, really valuable. But the game I played in that part of my career was figuring out ways to tell the story differently to make an asset look more valuable. And I don't mean that like we were tricking people. It just means there's an arbitrage opportunity in value based on how the story is told and how the spreadsheet is built. And I was great at that. So that's what I learned there, and I learned how much value could be unlocked by that. But it's seeing something different in the story, which is very different than what we do in lean, where we're looking for waste in the actual work and how do we improve the actual value creation. That's very, very different. And you can make money at both, and both are important over time. I think being able to create value and more importantly, having the confidence to be able to create value and to make change, real physical change in the way processes happen, whether they're on a factory floor or in an office or whatever. It's just so powerful. It's also a huge self-esteem enhancement for those who learn how to do it when they're not afraid to make a change and then deal with the most likely case, which is whenever you make a change, everything doesn't work right the first time. So you iterate your way to where you need to be, and gaining that confidence. There's just not a very big percentage, especially of middle management, that knows how to do that, has the confidence how to do it. And so I learned that very, very early on, and that's been with me my whole career, and it's very powerful. And I'm working my tail off to teach that to the folks here. And boy, when they get it, it is just so fun to watch. You can see it in the way they walk and they talk and they act and they, everything. So it's wonderful, but it's not an easy thing to teach. You don't do it in a classroom. I can tell you that with PowerPoint slides.
No, that really resonates with me, Jim. That's kind of reminds me of my career in Toyota too. It's an important part of what Toyota developed people to do was to make change.
Yeah.
So you're at Lantech. You obviously were given some roles. You said you ascended to leadership role CEO in 95, and then all of a sudden Jim Womack made your company pretty famous. What was it like to transition to that role as a CEO, and what did you have to do differently?
I had a real gift when I came into the CE role. So my real problem was I was 28, 29, and I was ready to take over the freaking world full of piss and vinegar. And so that part I had to deal with, and I didn't have some of the wisdom that I have now to approach things a little differently. But what I did have is I had a very detailed understanding of the way the business worked, because I'd been in all these Kaizens all over, and we'd literally transformed the entire company, been through every business process, every manufacturing process in the prior 4.5 years or so, 4 years. And so, I knew where every nut and bolt was and how every process worked. And that is so powerful. And it's something, I don't know as well now as I did then, which is a bit of a handicap compared to then. So that's what I had coming in. But the biggest issue was how to get other people to have that same passion and be able to drive change. That's what I did not know how to do in 1995. And I really didn't learn how to do that until really the mid to late 2000s when I met a mentor that helped teach me how to teach. I made up for it with just freaking hard work early on. I was so bound and determined to grow this place and to figure out how I could turn it into a top-tier profitability engine as well. And a lean transformation into itself does not create dramatic profitability improvement. You have to figure out how to wring the profitability, wring the towel and get the profitability out of the improvements you make. And it took me a little bit of time to figure out how to do that.
Well,
But
what were some of those, Jim? What were some of those pivotal points that like matured your thinking as you've been on this journey?
I think, I mean, there's a bunch of them. Obviously, early on, that understanding that you have to know the work, and then the understanding that when you get very far away from it for any period of time, your knowledge is not going to work anymore. You just can't manage it from the third floor in a conference room. You just can't. You certainly can't problem solve from the third floor in a conference room. And I have made that mistake for epochs in my career, and then come back to understanding that I got to get all the way down to the problem. And you don't have to get down to every problem, but you have to get down to enough of them, and you have to have a process where when your organization isn't solving them, that's where you go rather than sort of pontificate, which is what I did a few times. But anyway, I would say big changes for me beyond the first early learnings around lean and how to make change and just the specifics around standardized work and problem solving and pull and those sorts of things, were when Bob Morgan, my mentor, took me back to the floor and not only had me make the changes, but made me freaking stand there, not for a week and make some changes and assign them to somebody else, but until it was stable. And I don't know, I was on the floor for 6, 8 weeks, something like that, solid. And I did a couple different things, but most of the time I was in one cell, redesigning this cell that did electrical panels for one of our machines. And just to see how hard it is and how much detail's in it and what all you got to do. And it just drives a different level of respect for the people that are making those changes. So that was big. And then the fact that, and I write about that in the book, but I left for a short period of time and on a different line that I'd been teaching on, there was just enormous deterioration when I returned from this pretty short overseas trip, and how despondent I was and how frustrated I was. And to realize that deterioration is inevitable, number one, and number two, it's not a people problem that people are flawed. It's that stuff changes. Stuff happens. If my system in the organization can't respond rapidly to the deterioration in a process when some outside thing changes, causing that deterioration rapidly, then all the improvements I'm making over here with Kaizens or other improvements get offset by deterioration, and I don't get any financial return or any other kind of return for my work. So that understanding in a very visceral way was huge to me.
Well, that's really, Jim, that's really good insight. And you mentioned just a moment ago your book, The Work of Management, which you published through us, the Lean Enterprise Institute. Maybe you can share a few of the key insights you meant to convey. I mean, you just shared one just now, but maybe you can go a little bit more depth into what some.
I think the main theory here is that improvement has got to accumulate. You've got to set up a system that can accumulate benefits. And it's unlike the sort of traditional, at least American view of I'm looking for the next big win, the next big hit that's going to make me rich. No, the way I've been really successful is by accumulating incremental benefits and then learning how to not let those deteriorate. So when I add the next chunk, it actually accumulates. That's the primary purpose of the book, is to describe that principle. And then what do you have to do so that your organization can actually accumulate those benefits? That's what I would say. And that's about the management system specifically that allows you to do that.
Yeah, maybe you could elaborate a little bit on that. I mean, the book really does speak to your own personal learning and how that personal learning then was parlayed into developing Lantech's management system, specifically its daily management system. Could you talk a little bit about kind of what that system's comprised of? What are some of its key elements? How does it work?
So the system, if you came and just watched the system, I mean, basically every area of the company is touched every morning, and everything connects all the way up through top management every morning. And so, people call those Gemba walks or management, we call it the WAR here, the walkabout review. And I think there's some subtle components of it that are really, really important. So it has multiple purposes. So its first purpose is an escalation process for problems that are going on that can't be resolved immediately. And that's what most people pick up on immediately and they kind of implement, is this escalation process. And it's very, very valuable and very, very important. And during the huge downturn that happened in 2008 and during the pandemic and other periods of time where you got to kind of declare martial law, that escalation process is absolutely incredibly valuable. But what's really important is we have metrics in every single functional area of the company around quality, cost, delivery, and safety. And those metrics set up a average mean of performance over a rolling 90-day period. And then any point in time, any morning that the prior day's performance was below that mean, then we go to look at, okay, we ask the manager to figure out why it was subpar over what they've been able to perform at the prior day or the prior week. And, there'll be 10 reasons why there were these defects, of which they just need to pick one and put it on what we call a quality loop board, and then go after solving that problem at the root. And so what happens is you create a culture of problem solving over issues that are very, very fresh with live crime scenes. And it allows you on a daily basis to teach problem solving, go investigate and figure out where the problem is before you throw solutions at it, et cetera, every day at every stop in little 10-minute batches. What that does is drives improvement because the average moves up because the number of defects starts dropping from all the problem solving. So even though you're trying to hold the mean moves up. And so and then, as I tell people, as soon as the mean, we move the mean up, and then they start getting reds again, and they get all upset. And I said, well, as soon as you are all green for too long in a row, I used to bring a cookie, big chocolate chip cookie, and we'd celebrate, and then we'd move all the lines. And I still tell them that because so many people think those measures are about a letter grade like in school, and they're not. They're a tool to drive productivity and problem solving. So that's the second part. And then the third part is actual process improvement that's not from those metrics, but it's just an improvement, maybe a new product introduction or an automation tool we put in place. And you can use, or we use, tools called A3s and KTMs to drive those improvements, but you can use the same daily management process to make sure they stay on track and to solve problems cross-functionally, et cetera, because most things get stuck because people don't know whose decision it is to make a decision to get something done, and we get functional areas fighting with each other and that sort of stuff, and this allows that to get resolved immediately, generally within the same morning. So that's kind of a sense of how that management system works.
Could you say what a KTM is? Just
what is
a KTM?
So it's called Key Task Monitoring System. It's some people would think of it a bit like a Gantt chart, but it's not. It's a way to track a strategy or a plan, standardized work for accomplishing something, okay, with the task, with a timeline of how long it's going to take. Generally, we make them in blue. And then it's got a second row underneath the row of the plan where you track your progress. And anytime you fall behind in progress, then it can andon just like you would on a factory floor or in a processor when your data goes red, and then we can react to it. So that's what it is. And a KTM stems from an A3, which is basically the business purpose and what the overall plan is for trying to accomplish something.
Great, thanks.
I think my favorite part of that last explanation was the cookie for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, the groups, I'd bring the cookie in and they'd all look at their feet like, oh, dang, he's bringing a cookie.
I love, but I hate the cookie.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
So there's some people in our audience that are fairly new in their lean journey.
Yeah.
Are there some key things maybe they should consider as they get started or try to broaden their efforts? Jim, any advice?
Well, the first thing is that lean is a participatory sport. I don't know how you do a lean conversion without doing it from the top down. I don't know that it's possible to have a real lean conversion unless you do it from the top down. And the reason for that is that I don't think that you can have believers underneath convert believers above, but you can have believers above convert believers below. And so if you're going to set up a process to change your belief structure about how you solve problems and how much waste there is in your system, there's no way to do that without actually getting involved at the detailed level with your sleeves rolled up and digging in. And it is scary as all get out to start because you feel like you're going to look like an idiot or do something dumb. But how powerful you feel once you're not afraid of making change is amazing. And when you get into the detail of fixing stuff, it's a freaking blast. I mean, it's so much fun. So it is fun, but you gotta get over the fear to dive in. And so that would be the first thing I would say, is that you can't skip that step. You have to personally learn how to do the components of lean, like standardized work and pull and problem solving and such. But it's not just about knowing how to do it. You have to do it enough to be able to coach people on being able to do it, and run into problems and deal with the fact that it's harder than it looks in some places, and that sort of thing. So you gotta sort of commit. The payoff is enormous, though, in terms of the payoff is not in the financial benefits you get from the first conversion. The payoff comes in that you've taught yourself and your organization a capability that other organizations don't have. And then once you have that capability, you can leverage it. I mean, our biggest sort of improvements in financial performance have not come from the initial lean transformation or the initial sort of process. It's come from what that then led us to be able to do. So I would have never insourced at the level I've insourced if I didn't have the confidence in what we could do. I would never have put a factory in Europe and done what we did if I didn't know how to do lean, because I would have thought there's no way I can compete in Western Europe. But I can compete effectively globally in Western Europe and out of the United States because our processes are better. So anyway, that's not an elevator speech. That's too long for that, but that's what I would say.
Compelling nonetheless. So as you've shared with us already, I mean, you've been at this for a while. You've been making things at Lantech since you were a kid, and been around all those just manufacturing processes that are involved in the operation. You've also been at this sort of making improvements game for quite a long time too. But of course, especially in recent years, the conditions within which we make things and the conditions within which we solve problems is changing. I guess I'm talking specifically about advancements in technology. Of course, the topic you kind of can't avoid talking about these days is AI, but there have been many other advancements across many other technological dimensions. Could you speak a little bit to what's been the experience at Lantech, maybe here in the last couple of years in particular, with regard to some of these advancements in technology and how that's been changing conditions on the shop floor, and even changing perhaps the way that problems are getting solved and the way that continuous improvement happens in the company?
So I sound like an old man. I managed through the .com change. I have managed through the IoT phenomenon and now AI. And I would say that in all three of those cases, or the first two, not so much the third yet anyway, I jumped too soon. I jumped in I shouldn't say I jumped too soon. I jumped at the right time. I jumped too big too soon. Most of the technologies I've seen are every bit as valuable as they're sold to be. They have huge potential, at least in line with the way they're sold, and none of them are near as far along as they're sold to be. So I was prematurely correct on .com changes to our industry and prematurely correct on IoT. And that caused my investment level to be much higher than it needed to be, and caused a distraction from some of the core things of value add I could have been doing. I would say that. Having said that, you ignore them at your peril. So do I think AI, for example, and automation, all the automation, how automation is becoming less expensive and more, I'll call it user-friendly to get started in? Yeah. Does that have advantages? Absolutely. Should we be in it? Absolutely. I go in as an experimental level now, much more aggressively and sooner, and I wait to jump in fully until I can show and prove myself in my organization with my people that I can do that. But what I would say is the biggest transition, it's bigger than those three things, has been the generational change in my workforce. I would say that's been the more difficult one to manage through than the technology ones, and the most important one. And for those of us of a certain age, the culture of team leadership, it goes all the way through our HR systems and the way we think about how we treat people. We've always been a company where respect is the center of our culture. But even given that, I mean, it's really changed how we interact with folks, how we develop folks. level of skills that people come in with. Those things have all changed. And getting real about that and then building the systems and capability to deal with that has been actually a bigger issue for us. Maybe that's not the same with all companies, but at least for the age company we are and the age of the management team here, that's been the bigger issue.
I think in our experience on the field, Mark could attest to this or not, but we hear similar things. I mean, I think you are not alone. So the book was written now, I guess, almost a decade ago. It's been a while, and as much as has changed since the '90s, even since the mid 2010s, a lot has changed. And I guess I'm curious, if you were setting yourself to the task of writing that book today, and you picked up the manuscript that you had written 10 years ago, what, if anything, would you maybe include in the book that wasn't there, or perhaps frame or just approach, describe differently?
I think it's been a while since I read the book, so I don't know how strongly I made this point in the book, but I didn't understand or preach or make enough of an emphasis on how important it is to bring the others along with me on the journey as it is. I didn't talk about what it takes to make the belief change. I think I cover it in one of the chapters, but I don't think I weaved it through everything I was doing as much as I would now if I were to rewrite it. So learning how to learn and bring others along the learning journey with you is a really important thing. Because if you don't have an army that you're building as you're going, you can only go at your own speed. And so learning how to sort of bring the army along or build a posse or your tribe or whatever the term is you want to use is just something that I value much, much higher now. And then some of that comes from coming out of COVID. I lost so much of my workforce in transition during that time frame just because of the transitions that were going on, and also just the age of my workforce, that I'm now in year 3 or so of just rebuilding my management team and dealing with a lot of these folks that are of a different generation than I am and teaching them, and reminding myself how much work that is and how long it takes and how important it is. And it sort of happened naturally because I had a whole crew of people that learned alongside me the first round. Now I'm teaching them, and it's just different. It's very, very different. And you can't take shortcuts. There are no freaking shortcuts. I remember one time I was I was lamenting to my mentor about this person that I'd been teaching and how they just didn't get it and they weren't working along. And he was asking, well, how long have they been on the shop floor working on this? And I said, well, I've been down there. I've been 2 workshops, 2 weeks. We've been down there for 2 weeks. We did this. And he said, you really must think this person's really smart. I said, what do you mean? I said, well, I mean, it took you like 8 weeks. You still didn't freaking have it. And you think they can get it in 2? But that sort of experiential understanding of what it takes and the investment required is something that I would probably more emphasize in the book. Like I said, I may have emphasized it a fair amount, but I guarantee you I didn't understand it like I do now.
Well, it's really good. I mean, the differences you're describing between sort of that first turn of the crank where you're learning it and you've got the team, the leadership team, the management team there alongside you, similarly learning it.
It's all exciting. It's all exciting. You're making big process changes, and it's a thrill, and you're getting huge productivity gains every time and big physical changes. And it's not so much after that.
Well, and then you generate changes. And so often what we see is the company latches onto the change, the solution for what to spread, for what to share and have others learn the solution. Forgetting that it was a learning process that led to that solution in the first place. And so perhaps the thing to spread is that learning process, not just the best practice or something along those lines. So in addition to time, I mean, you spoke to 8 weeks for you versus 2 weeks for this other individual. Aside from just patience and sufficient time, what would be some of the other, insights that you've learned over the years about process for others to learn? How to facilitate that, how to lead that?
I think you have to allow people the reins. They have to have their head in a horse term. You know what I mean? They have to be able to try things on their own. You have to allow them to go down some dead end alleys, I think, and they have to stub their toe. And you got to stand there with them and go, ooh, man, that looks like that hurt. That toe, it's kind of black and blue. You know what I mean? So
here's a cookie.
Yeah, here's a cookie. I mean, I think early on, I tried to shortcut all those mistakes and the pain that came from them. And you know this as a father, you know this, but for whatever reason at work, I didn't do a very good job of that. So my kids may say I didn't do a good job of that either. But I think that the learning process is very similar to being a parent when you're doing your best job. These are human beings we're dealing with, and the human beings primarily learn by experience, and they have to have the full gamut of the experience, I think. And they have to have tried a change and see it not work. They have to try the change, walk away and have it fail, and then come back and be frustrated, and they have to blame the other people for the reason it's frustrated. And then they have to learn that, well, maybe it wasn't their fault. Maybe it was the fact that the system wasn't really set up for success. And, all those maturity things you have to learn in driving change, plus 20 others, you got to learn it through experience and stub toes. I don't know any other sort of way to say that. And I think, I say this in the book, this is about belief change. And the definition of a belief change is when you're in the dark alley and the ugly people are coming after you, what tool do you pick up to defend yourself? That's what you know is what you believe in. And if you don't teach it at that level of stub toes, then it's not the tool they pick up when they get in the dark alley. And so you haven't really made the belief change. And that's where, dang it, when we don't know anything else to do, we can't figure out what to do. What do? We get closer to the problem. But man, that's not the natural instinct for so many people. Pick up a different view, pick up a different, it's about the creativity of figuring out how to see the problem differently. And that's not how we're taught in school. That's not how we're, traditional management teaches.
Yeah. So you mentioned in this conversation about Bob Morgan, you've mentioned the 8 weeks that it took you to learn some.
Another 10 years. Yeah.
You talked about stub toes. I imagine that Bob sat there with you when you had a couple of stub toes yourself.
Oh yeah.
I mean, you tell that story so well in your book, Jim. I mean, before we ever met, I had a chance to read that book and was really personally just inspired by that learning experience that Bob put you through, acting in the team leader role for as long as you did. And clearly, I mean, just talking to you now, however many years removed from that experience, it was obviously very impactful for you. And so my question is, there are other leaders probably leaders we know who also would benefit from that kind of an experience. But of course, it takes time. It's quote unquote, sort of below their pay grade, or it's not their responsibility. They've got other higher level, more important, let's say, responsibilities. So I guess what would you say to someone that might, to at least convey the value that you got out of the experience? You may not be able to convince them to do it necessarily or sell it to them, but to at least convey what you got out of it and to encourage them to consider perhaps going through a similar experience themselves.
So I sat in Bob Morgan's living room, and I think I might have told this story in the book, but I sat in Bob Morgan's living room trying to convince him to come work for me and help and make the conversion when I was in deep doo-doo in 2005, 2006 timeframe. And first of all, he said something in the order of, "You can't afford me." He said it slightly nicer than that, but he basically said, "You can't afford me." And then he said, "I would be willing to help you do it, but you have to clear your diary, clear your calendar." And I said, "Well, what am I going to do about all these other important meetings I'm doing and all this other important stuff I'm doing?" And he looked at, and he had, reading glasses. He kind of looked over the top of the glasses at me. And he said, "Jim, so how good are those meetings working for you right now?" The point was, and so what I did is I handed all that off to my second in command, and it didn't get any better, but it didn't get any worse. And then I started getting after the main thing. And I said this a little earlier in this talk, but the power of having the confidence to be able to make change yourself is just incredible. And the power of being able to teach other people how to make improvement and change is unbelievably powerful. And the power of knowing how to make stuff, especially if you're in the United States right now with the dynamics that are going on, I just can't overemphasize how important I think that is. And so there's a lot of people out there that know how to change data, make PowerPoint slides, tell convincing stories, and do motivational speeches. And I'm not saying they're not valuable. I don't mean to belittle that. But there aren't that many people that know how to drive real change. There aren't that many people that know how to really take real waste out. There aren't that many people that can teach how to do that. And boy, if you can become one of those people, forget whatever job you're in right now. Think about what you just did for yourself. So if you get the opportunity to be around a mentor that can teach you how to do this, do not waste that opportunity. I mean, I had a number of my executives that worked with me during that time frame that just couldn't stomach it. I'm in a unique position, since I'm a owner of the company. I don't really need to sort of be some certain kind of person for somebody else. For me, it was all about just how do I actually make this place better. So it was probably a little easier for me than it would be for some people. But yeah, that's kind of what I would say.
That's a great story. I totally agree with you, Jim. Hey, so we saw each other last year, and you talked to me a little bit about how the pandemic has changed your business. Why don't you share a little bit about the impact it's had for you over those last few years?
I'll go fast on how it impacted me, because a lot of the people that maybe listen to this probably experienced the same thing. So the start was fear over being able to stay open, which we were able to stay open. The second thing was fear over revenue. Are people going to continue to buy machines? Oh my gosh, they started buying machines at 60-70% above our run rate for 2 years solid. So that was like, oh dang. And then obviously we had the problem with the supply chain that everybody else did, especially with electronics, which caused all kinds of issues. So we instantly had to grow. We instantly had to figure out how to run this management system when many of us were not in the office, or many people, I was in the office, but many people were not in the office. And we needed to figure out how to solve problems that were out. We became instantly unstable. So solving problems when you're relatively stable and you can afford to do it in this very methodical way is one thing. When you're at war, it's completely different in terms of what you're able to do. So we, I think, did a very effective job of managing our way through COVID and getting parts in and building what we needed to make and take care of customers and blah, 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 blah. The problem is when COVID was sort of over, things sort of settled down, we completely had forgotten how to run the friggin' company. We had turnover of folks. The management system had turned into a escalation only process, and all of our metrics had been read for so long that whole process that I described earlier had sort of gone away. I had layers of management that didn't really know how to problem solve in the traditional way. We had solved problems with contractors and overtime and all the bad stuff. So we had to wean ourselves from that and then reteach the principles and kind of start over. I remember telling my wife one night, not long after COVID was over, I was like, oh, do I have the energy to do this all again? I got to start over. I got to redo it. And that's what we've been doing, and with pretty good success, but with a lot of blood, sweat, and tears again. So I would say that the value is still there. There's a lot of companies I see with what I call COVID hangover, and there's no way around it than reteaching from the team leader up. You have to reteach the principles, and at least we had to run a comb through all our processes and all the standardized work in every freaking cell to get the waste out that was put in by all the workarounds we put in during COVID. Everything from how we moved people apart to the way parts arrived so they were clean and nobody got sick from germs that were theoretically on the parts that weren't, to managers that didn't know how to problem solve, to putting all the metrics back in place and blah, blah, blah. All that stuff had to be put back. We're still not completely back to where we were, but we're much improved on where we were, coming out of COVID. And I think I got much more separated from the work. It's amazing when you've got to stand 6 feet away, you can't see what's going on. I mean, it's just, I can't tell you how detrimental that was. And even it wasn't even just the 6 feet. You get anywhere close to somebody and they get nervous and you can't see the work and you can't problem solve effectively, and you can't, or I'm not saying you can't, but it's just difficult. So it hurt us a lot more than I thought it did at the time. It took me a long time to realize the damage that was done. I tell people all the time, your financial results are a result of the work you did a long time ago. Even the daily metrics I have are the results of some period of improvement in the past. Watching the work is where you can see where the real health of the organization is. That's where you can tell. I mean, I know you, Mark. You come walking into my factory, you're looking around. Doesn't matter what I'm saying. You know real quick whether I'm lying or not. And I can do the same thing. You walk in, you can tell real quick what's really going on. So anyway, that's what I would say. It changed that, and I had to. That's where I got the realization I had to teach a new generation these principles, a new generation that didn't go through the transition like I did.
Well, so speaking of that new generation, and here you are kind of back at it, teaching them and kind of rebuilding the system that you once had going so well, and kudos to you for that. To say you can't really see the work unless, at even 6 feet distance from it, just makes me think about the leaders that never even get that close. So what would you say, Jim? I mean, what is it you talked about questioning whether you had the energy to do it all over again. All of us are looking for sources of energy, things that motivate us, things that tap into our passions. What would you say those things are for you today? What are the things that are really motivating you, challenging you, kind of inspiring your learning these days?
I love watching this next generation of people get it. When you see it click, I mean, it is so fun. I mean, I've got my operations leaders now are at least next generation. And when they actually get it and you see them stand up and lead with those principles, it's just, I mean, it's fun. It's really, really fun. And I've got 2 of my 3 children now in the business. Now they're not in the operations side of the business yet. They're learning other parts of the business first, like I did, which I think is important, to learn the customer side and such. But once they come into it, I'm excited for them to learn those principles. Like I said, they get a swagger about them. I mean, these young folks, they get a swagger I'm watching a guy who, runs our supply chain that was on the shop floor for 6 months, working through the last set of workshops, and then helped me rebuild the management system. And now watch him walk into a vendor location. No vendor's going to pull wool over this guy's eyes. I mean, let's go out and look at your warehouse. Where are those parts on the shelf? Okay, now how do you replenish those? I mean, it's a completely different conversation. So I get a real kick out of watching that and seeing that when that happens. And, you can lift, I just realized you can really make a difference in people's lives and lift them. I mean, not that I'm against making money. I love making money. I love growing the business, but that's not as much of a thrill as seeing the people development now for me, where I am in my career.
That's awesome. Perfect way to end the conversation. Thanks, Jim, again, for your time and for this wonderful conversation. I've been here scribbling notes, lots of takeaways from me. So I hope our audience will similarly appreciate it. We appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks for your time and for talking to me. And you guys are more than welcome to buy a stretch wrapper if you'd like to at Lantech.com. We make great stretch wrappers. They're like Doritos. We can make more if you order them. It's not a problem. Case erectors, or even maybe that little book that these guys were talking about might be a good idea. But thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Bye.